hope for the best, but we'll keep in touch with you. If you have doubts, if you're worried, we talk you through it. If you get the Marshall Scholarship, we're there with you throughout the process, always available to support and advise you. And finally, our application timeline. The application opens in early June. Our campus deadline is August 23rd, 2021, after which we'll hold the campus interview that I just described. And the Marshall deadline this year is September 28th. And then if you are selected as a finalist, you would be invited to interview the Wednesday and Thursday before Thanksgiving in November. As we start our discussion, I will pop this link into the chat. It is a list of resources that I've put together for navigating finding postgraduate opportunities in the UK that I hope you'll find helpful. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to our amazing panel and allow them to take on the rest. And I will be here for any questions in the chat should you have them. So thank you and welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Leanne, and hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us either today live or on the recording. I'm Becca Farnham. I'm a 2012 Marshall Scholar. I am currently based in London, and I will be chairing our fantastic panel of various Marshall alums who are going to be sharing with you a little bit about their experience in the UK, life in the UK, life as a Marshall after or during time in the UK. And what it was like. We may also kind of speak a little bit on what our process of the application and that self-introspective period was. As we go, please do feel free to drop questions in the chat or just, unmute and interrupt yourself as well if you're happy to be on the recording. So just to kind of quickly reiterate, the Marshall Scholarship is a postgraduate scholarship for Americans to study at any university and any field of study in the UK. And that is one of the particularly exciting and different parts of, I would say, what distinguishes the Marshall from several other fellowships and scholarships is its kind of breadth of disciplines and geography within the UK in terms of where you can study as a Marshall. So to kind of kick off and hear a little bit about that diversity, I'm going to have Sandra and Doug introduce themselves at some length, talking you through kind of how they got the Marshall in the first moment, where they studied at, and kind of what they are doing now. Doug, can I pass it over to you?
Sure. Thanks, Becca. Hi, everyone. My name is Doug Spaniel. I was a 1992 Marshall Scholar, so I can see everyone getting out their calculator trying to figure out just how old I am. But I'm happy to be here and happy to share some of my experiences. And also, I might be able to give some perspective of what it's been like throughout my career now that I'm sort of mid-career and the impact this has had. Can you all hear me okay? I just got like the warning sign, my internet is unstable. We're good? Great. So a quick bit about myself. I did my undergraduate at the University of Illinois, and after the Marshall, I got my doctorate at The Ohio State University. It should be pointed out that neither of those schools made the Elite Eight this year, despite being a #1 and a #2 seed in the tournament. But we don't really have to discuss that if you don't want. In between that, when I had the very good fortune of being a Marshall Scholar, I studied at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, England. And it was an absolutely transformative experience for me personally and professionally. For me, it was the first time I was ever outside of the US. And I really should admit at this point that I'm a bassoonist. I'm now bassoon professor at Butler University in Indianapolis. And Becca was saying that there is an amazing breadth of fields that one can study as a Marshall Scholar. And I've said it many times before that if they will support a bassoonist, they will support anyone in any field. Sandra, you want to say something more profound than that?
I'm not sure this will be more profound, but yeah, sure. Happy to speak about my experience. So my name is Sandra Dorning, and I'm from Gresham, Oregon, which is where I'm calling from now. I did my undergrad at the University of Oregon, so I'm particularly happy and excited today to speak to students who are in Oregon as well about the Marshall Scholarship and about this opportunity, because it was a really amazing experience that I had as well. I was a 2018 Marshall Scholar, so I just finished my program there back in August. So the experience is quite recent for me. But yeah, like Doug, I had never been outside of the US prior to the Marshall Scholarship. So it was also a very big and daunting, but incredibly exciting chance to really, live and immerse myself in British culture, which is something that I had wanted to do sort of all throughout my undergrad. I thought, oh, it'd be really cool to go study abroad in the UK for a semester. And it didn't happen. And then I thought, oh, maybe grad school will be a way to have that happen. And it ended up being that, the Marshall's a really great opportunity to really, formulate a program of study that really is particular to your very specific interests. And so that was a real exciting component of the Marshall that I was intrigued by. So at the University of Oregon, I did my undergrad in marine biology. And that was a really exciting program that I enjoyed very much. And as I, studied the sciences and really developed as an undergrad, I also came to find that I had a real interest in environmental policy and about what we do with the science that we produce. So I went on to then apply for the Marshall Scholarship after completing my undergrad, and then went on to do 2 years in the UK. The first year was at the University of York, where I studied marine environmental management, did a master's program in that topic, and then I followed that up with a master's degree at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland and did a master's degree in global environment, politics, and society. So for me, the Marshall was a really great opportunity to spend a year doing sort of applied marine science management type studies, and then to do a very, very different master's program the second year on environmental policy and to really dive into the social and political sciences. So for me, it was a great way to merge those two interests of mine and develop into an interdisciplinary form of study that I'm hoping to take forward now that I've finished my program.
Thanks so much, Sandra. That's fantastic. And I will introduce myself a little further as well. I went to Michigan State University, so we are 3 for 3 on state schools, I will say, on this panel. So maybe one kind of Marshall myth immediately debunked in that these national fellowships and the prestigious scholarships are not just for Ivy League and that kind of thing, right? I mean, they genuinely are open. And yes, you're in a kind of slightly different position as you're applying to them, but the selection committees and the programs genuinely are looking for a diversity of range of experiences in all kinds of ways. And you can be really competitive for many of these very selective scholarships. So please do not let that hold you back. And in fact, let that bolster you instead. So I went to Michigan State and looked at anthropology and international relations. I was really interested in the interplay between local and global politics, particularly around the Middle East and the environment. So I applied for the Marshall based on a particular program and professor in the UK that were looking at water politics in the Middle East in a really exciting way, and very different from what really any US program that I had found was able to do. So I moved over in 2012 to do a master's in water security at the University of East Anglia, and then follow that up with an LLM, which is a law degree at the University of Edinburgh. So you also have 2 Scottish fans on the panel. I would say that one of the things that, as Sandra really already alluded to, I really appreciated about the Marshall was the fact that the kind of default setup of the scholarship is 2 years. When the Marshall was first began, many Americans did a second bachelor's at Oxford and some of the UK's other schools, which was, a kind of combination of undergrad and grad school and a very particular thing about the UK academic system, which has now evolved in quite a lot of ways. And so now most Marshall scholars choose to do 2 one-year master's programs. In the UK, undergrad is 3 years, at least in England. And master's programs, which are often 2 years in the US, are generally 1 year in the UK instead. And tend to be kind of a much more like interdisciplinary kind of tunnel vision focus of something, which means that many Marshalls, as Sandra did, will decide to do, kind of here's my policy thing, and then here's my science thing, or here is my music and art thing, and then here is my management and business thing, or that kind of thing, right? And kind of choose to use those 2 years to get really different angles on a topic, or explore 2 different themes that were both interesting for them in undergrad and they didn't kind of quite manage to jump into. and that kind of thing. Whereas there are also plenty of options for 2-year programs. Some of those are research masters. Other marshals will also decide to begin a PhD program or doctoral studies with 2 years of funding guaranteed by the marshal. And by and large, kind of by the time you spent 2 years as a doctoral student in a department, they will find funding for your 3rd and or 4th year to continue. So a good number of marshals do that as well. I will also mention that there is a 1-year option for the Marshall Scholarship, which tends to be taken up by students who are perhaps on their way to med school, vet school, law school, or another kind of particularly long program, and really they might really appreciate getting another country perspective, doing a different kind of master's before they jump into that or whatnot, but maybe don't want to spend a full 2 years and then a full X number of additional years in another kind of professional training qualification. So do talk with your professors, with Leanne and with Ashley, about kind of what setup makes most sense to you and all of that kind of thing. But it really is, as Doug pointed to, also just an incredibly flexible program that does range, right? My year, we also had a guitarist and a violinist. We did not have a bassoonist, which I'm kind of sad about now. But I think there's just really something incredibly special about a scholarship that has engineers, lawyers, business administrators, and musicians all on the same academic scholarship, right? And kind of what that does for the Marshall culture among ourselves as well, which perhaps leads me to my first question. I would love to hear a little bit from both of you, Sandra and Doug, about kind of what your interactions with the Marshall network of scholars themselves were like, maybe in the UK while you were here as a scholar, and now kind of back in the US, what have some of those relationships or the opportunities offered by the network to you? Sandra?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that one. So my interaction with the Marshall community, so the sort of other scholars in my cohort, as well as scholars in other cohorts who are also there and overlapping with me, it kind of changed from year to year a bit. And I think it varies among a lot of different people in the community. So for me, for example, my first year at the University of York, I was the only Marshall Scholar studying at that university at that time. So most of my time that first year was really spent connecting more with the people that I was in class with every day, and the people at my university. In contrast, other scholars will go to universities where there are multiple Marshalls studying there, and so they have sort of a more direct and more kind of frequent interaction with some of their fellow Marshalls. But no matter where you study and whether there are other Marshalls studying there or not, there are various events throughout the year that give you an opportunity to connect with the other people that are in your cohort. In addition to sort of the initial orientation period where everyone kind of comes over to the UK together, there are several events throughout the year. And one for me that was particularly just really amazing and I had a wonderful experience was that every spring the Marshall program as a whole does a trip to some different location each year in the UK. And in the spring of 2019, when I was there, we went to Northern Ireland. So spending a couple of days with all of the Marshalls all together and getting to tour different places and get to hear local perspectives about the history and culture of a place. Not only was it a really amazing way to learn about a place and about history that I didn't previously know about, but it was a great way to also sort of connect. And at that point, I'd been there for 7 or 8 months by that point. And so just really connecting with Marshalls and sort of comparing experiences. And every time we sort of were brought together for a Marshall sort of themed or organized event, I felt like it was a great chance to, just like share stories and really understand how people's experiences differed in different parts of the UK. So those are really great occasions to get together and to get to know the other students on the Marshall. And even though I didn't interact with the Marshalls necessarily as frequently as people who kind of were nearer to other Marshalls, I did make friends with a number of people on my cohort and got to travel around and see them and experience the UK with them on different occasions. And it also always just felt really nice to know that there was a cohort of Americans who were all kind of in the same experience, and that you could always have someone to reach out to if you had questions or wanted to get together, or any sort of thing like that if you were visiting a city or something like that. So it's nice to have sort of organized occasions where we all got together, but then of course there's so much freedom for people to get together and become friends, in outside of those events as well.
I can say my experience was a little like Sandra's in that I was the only Marshal in Manchester. In fact, I only knew one other American in Manchester my whole time there. My experience was a little bit different than Sandra's in that cell phones didn't exist in 1992 and the internet was in its infancy. So keeping in touch with folks around the country wasn't nearly as easy. But I do have really fond memories of those Marshall sort of get together, the big events. I have a really prized possession, which is our class of, a photo of our class of Marshall Scholars at Kensington Palace with Princess Di, which sits on our piano at home. So there really are some special memories. I can say on a personal relationship, there are a couple like Marshalls from my class or from other things that I know and am in touch with. But the personal connections I made were much more my friends in Manchester, my music colleagues, my teachers, fellow musicians, and those have been really long lasting. I mean, I'm still sending messages and texting and Christmas cards and the like, with lots of folks in the UK, and have done musical projects with a lot of folks during that time. I also have to say that I missed out on like half of that introductory thing. I think everyone gathers in DC and then goes to London. And the school I attended started earlier than typical universities in the UK. So I was there early. I was kind of like the advanced scout team, and then met up with them in London. And so it's not, I don't know if it qualifies as a regret, but I felt a little bummed out at the time and still do that I missed out on like that sort of big kickoff to the program.
Thanks, Doug. Yes, it's certainly not a dichotomy, I would say, but it tends to be that there are some Marshalls who really link into the scholar community while they're here, and that tends to be most of their friends and their community, right? Are other American postgrads on this particular scholarship program. And then others of us who, we're either at universities with fewer Marshalls immediately surrounding us, or, kind of personality-wise or whatever, do the kind of deep dive into British society and our uni groups and that kind of thing. And certainly, of course, many scholars do both of those, and everyone will do little pieces of either. But I think it is, again, just really special that one, the kind of scholarship network exists, and two, kind of does create all of these opportunities for those relationships, as Sandra was mentioning. The trip that happens that is led by the Marshall Aid Commemoration Commission. So that's the official kind of British government body set up to memorialize the Marshall Plan that helped rebuild Europe after World War II, after which the Marshall Scholarship is named. But then also the Association of Marshall Scholars, our alumni organization based in the US, also helps fund and organize a variety of events in the UK for scholars. We go to the Globe, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre each summer. We often play in a football, sometimes it's American style, sometimes it's British style, game against the Rhodes around Thanksgiving and or in the spring. We'll do a kind of internal retreat to the Scottish Highlands in the summer, and that kind of thing. This year with COVID, of course, many of those things have looked really differently. And we have scholars in the UK now, who arrived during the pandemic and spent their, pretty much entire first year of the Marshall under fairly strict lockdown regulations here in the UK. But at the same time, they have been doing really incredible programming, everything from an online cooking class offered by British refugee entrepreneurs on Zoom, where they're all kind of getting all the same ingredients and having, a shared table in the ways that we can, to Netflix watch parties and British theater screenings, and then talkbacks with the makers and creators afterwards and that kind of thing. So there's, Marshalls find a way to do different kinds of UK cultural interactions and that kind of thing as we go. I will say also, in addition to having completed the 2-year Marshall here in the UK, I then was lucky enough to have funding for my postgrad, or excuse me, for my doctorate. So I kept going and got a degree from King's College London, and am now still working in London as a professor at Syracuse University, London. So one thing that I really like about the Marshall is that it keeps importing, around 30 new American friends for me each year, which is really good fun to be able to keep up those ties. And in particular, kind of Marshalls through the the years have since served as teaching team assistants in some of my courses, collaborators for different research projects across, very widely different disciplines and all of those kind of things, which is a really great part of the scholarship experience as well. We had a really great question come through about applying, like when to apply and when to start thinking about this process. And yes, it is something that you apply for either before your senior year or shortly after graduation in terms of the kind of official application. But a lot goes into it, and a lot goes into thinking about whether UK is right for you, whether grad school is right for you, and all of those kind of things. So I do think it's maybe worth hearing a little bit from Doug and Sandra in terms of maybe your early undergrad years. When did you kind of learn about the scholarship? Were there other, kind of similarly competitive scholarships and fellowships that you were applying to as an undergrad that gave you some experience with this? And then kind of what prepped you to be ready to do the application? Doug, we'll start with you maybe.
Sure. Again, I feel like my experience might be a bit unusual, but I imagine most folks would say that, everyone has their unique story to tell. I came about applying for the Marshall not because I really wanted to apply for an elite scholarship and thought I was a great candidate. I came about it really because I had two sort of hangups. One was that I had never been outside of the US and I really wanted to go abroad, specifically to Europe. The other was that I was at a big state university, University of Illinois, which is one of our, country's top music schools and top universities, and that was great. But I really wanted to go to a conservatory, right? And I was tired of being intimidated by people who went to Juilliard and Eastman and Curtis. And so you put those two things together. I said, man, I want to go to a conservatory in Europe, right? And there was a particular teacher that I wanted to study with, a gentleman named William Waterhouse, who at the time was the UK's leading bassoonist performer teacher, and also the world's leading expert on all things bassoon, the history of the instrument, the repertoire, performance techniques, teaching techniques, etc. And he was sort of my idol, and I really wanted to work with him. So I said, okay, I want to go study at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester with William Waterhouse. How can I do it? And I did a giant search looking for funding opportunities, and only two emerged. One was the Marshall, and the other was the Fulbright. And I applied for both, and I got the Marshall first. And like I said, I was super fortunate, and everything fell into place. So my search was sort of very narrow and very sort of purpose driven. And like I said, I was very fortunate that it worked out.
My experience was a little circuitous at times, and definitely took a good chunk of the span of my undergrad, actually. I think I must have first become aware of the Marshall Scholarship because I was familiarized with the Office of Distinguished Scholarships at the University of Oregon, because I had, as an undergrad in my sophomore year, been awarded a Noah Holling Scholarship, which was another scholarship that office sort of promoted and advised. So that fellowship kind of exposed me, at least in the first instance as a sophomore, to the idea that, okay, after undergrad, there are these scholarships. And at the time I was like, okay, file that away for something I'll look into, like when I know more about what I want to do next. So I kind of became aware of it, and then really started becoming interested in thinking about, next steps and what the UK might offer when on that Noah Holling Scholarship, met people who had done master's programs in the UK, in Scotland. And so they kind of made me aware of some particular programs that sounded really interesting. So even before I decided to apply for the Marshall, there were a couple programs that I was looking into and thought, oh, this might be really neat. But again, nothing really concrete. And so then in the sort of leading up into my senior year, I thought, oh, maybe I'll do the Marshall. And at that point, I didn't actually have an accurate understanding of what it was. I thought it was a 1-year thing. And they're like, oh, no, it's actually a 2-year thing, unless you have a really specific reason to do the 1-year thing. So it's like, okay, I need to regroup and rethink, what is my plan? So I ended up sort of holding off and waiting and not applying the sort of first year that I thought I might be in the first year that I was eligible, because I really wanted to sort of make sure that it was the right fit and that it was going to be sort of what I wanted my next step to be, and that it was kind of made sense academically for me. And I'm really glad that I did, because then I had my senior year and a lot of my interests and directions that I decided to go next really came from some influential classes that I took my senior year and some really influential professors and mentor relationships that I developed during that time. And so once I sort of got into taking a number of these different classes in my political science major, and I realized I really wanted to pursue the sort of policy side of things as well as the marine management programs that I was interested in, yeah, that really kind of solidified for me, like, oh, the Marshall, like, let me come back and think about that again. Oh, wait, this could actually be a really amazing opportunity, because now I could pursue that international environmental politics angle, and I could also still pursue these programs that I was also really interested in the UK specifically. So that sort of like just journey that I think everyone takes during undergrad of figuring out, you know, what is it that I want? What is it that I like? What is it I want to do next? The Marshall was kind of like there in the background throughout all of that as I was trying to figure out what made sense. And so, yeah, then I realized that I thought I had a really compelling case to make for why the scholarship would be really useful for me. And I just thought this actually would be sort of ideal for me personally, because I'd love to be able to do both of these things and not have to choose. So that's really what made me interested in it. And so, as I say, I ended up applying the summer after graduating from the U of O. And so it was a, yeah, really exciting time. And I, yeah, sort of had gone through several different iterations of what I was looking into. I didn't apply for any other distinguished postgraduate scholarships. I had sort of in the early days looked into some other programs that, you know, that operate in the UK, but I had really been drawn to programs that weren't available to, you know, weren't covered by those programs. And so again, as Becca had said, one of the really appealing things to me about the Marshall was that you could design a program of study at the university, any university and program that you wanted in the UK. And so that allowed me to really set up that that sort of dual program design that I wanted. So that's what really ended up convincing me in to apply. And then, you know, kind of as Doug said, like things ended up working out, and it was really sort of my like shoot for the moon, see what happens. Didn't really have a backup plan or entirely know what I was going to do if I didn't get it. But yeah, it ended up working out, and you know, had a really good experience then once I got there. So.
Thank you both so much. I think that really does a great job of showing kind of the different paths that people will take to get to some of these places, whether it's a, you know, a very specific program or person, you know, and the Marshall is a vehicle for funding towards that, right? Or whether it's, you know, one of a various kind of things that you look at, and it's kind of the program that shapes it, and your fellowships and scholarships office and that kind of thing are a big part of that. For me, I had, like Sandra, been aware of Michigan State's, my undergrad's office, and kind of, you know, encouraged fairly early on as an undergrad that I might be competitive for some of these kind of things and I should take a look at them. I then applied for the Truman, which is a public policy undergraduate scholarship, and did not receive one, which I think is also something that I really do want to emphasize, that you know, kind of lack of success as traditionally defined is not necessarily an indicator for future lack of success with these kind of things. You learn an incredible amount during the application process, and also different programs are looking for slightly different things, right? And it is in fact the Truman process and kind of applying for some of these other undergraduate scholarships that introduced me to the academic program that then I applied for, and kind of gave me a narrative with the Marshall Scholarship. Because by the time I got to the Marshall place, I'd had a few rounds of experience kind of figuring out how to articulate what I was interested in and why I wanted to do this. And I had also by that point had a really great series of email dialogues with very specific British professors as a result of having, you know, learned about their particular departments and programs and that kind of thing, which I was then able to talk about in the Marshall Scholarship application and interview, which I think really kind of helped me stand out as well, right? Like, I've done my homework, you know, there are relationships they're waiting for me, and you know, everyone agrees this really is the right next step and all of that kind of thing. So I'm a huge advocate for the kind of value of this process, as Sandra was pointing to, in terms of kind of so much is happening during undergrad. You're getting, you know, introduced to a lot of different things and not necessarily often having the kind of time or space to connect the dots and do that introspection in terms of like, why do these 3 classes with very different titles all fascinate me, or that kind of thing. And the Marshall Scholarship the application process, even though, you know, as Leanne pointed out at the beginning, is complicated and like looks just quite daunting when you open it, right? It also really, really kind of creates a shape for you to do that reflection. And I think really does set you up for success, both in terms of its own application process, but also, you know, in a much more comprehensive way than most standard grad school and job applications do, right? Kind of helps give a framework for figure out why this matters and apply that. So I also have a lot of friends who applied for the Marshall and didn't get it, but used parts of their application language, right, to very successfully then win, you know, other grad school programs, job apps, and that kind of thing, right? And generally speaking, you know, probably ended up in the far better place for them, right, given where they really were, but still found that Marshall application process really useful. So yes, wanted to touch on that. I think the other, Sandra, as you were speaking, I thought it might be good also to reflect a little bit in terms of, you know, you've written that application, you know, you've written what your future is supposed to look like, all of that kind of thing by virtue of this application. Can you change your mind? So it'd be great to maybe hear one in the kind of immediate of the 2-year of the Marshall Scholarship Program, whether there were any kind of changes from what you wrote in your application and then what you did in the UK. And then Doug can maybe also give us a slightly longer view in terms of, you know, what it said in that dreaded, you know, like, where will you be in 5 years question kind of thing versus what you're doing now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. And I think I'll first say that actually my, and this was not really due to me changing my mind, but my, so on the application, you put your first and second choice for each of the 2 years. And the program that I ended up at actually was what I had listed as my second choice on the application, but through the process of actually applying to the universities once I had the scholarship, realized that that second choice was going to be a better fit and a better, where I needed to be. So even in that sort of first year before I even got into the UK, there were, you know, opportunities to kind of like figure out what was, you know, what was going to be right based on things that had changed in the program that I was interested in since I was interested in it. So basically the nature of the program had changed. And so I realized that I maybe needed to shift gears. So that was really good. And I'm so grateful that I ended up at the program that I was at because I had a wonderful experience at the University of York, and I'm really glad that that's where I ended up. And it was the right fit. It was the right place to be. In terms of like going forward and into the program, something that, you know, I didn't really realize when I was applying is that there is a lot of flexibility and freedom for figuring out what you want that second year to look like once you're in the UK. So there you're, you know, very much encouraged to, you know, kind of reassess what your plan was for that second year and can think about whether that's still what you want to pursue and still the right program for you, or whether those first few couple of months in the UK, and actually the, you know, sort of more than a year that has now passed since you applied for the program, whether, you know, you now have sort of a different, you know, goal in mind for what you want that second year to look like. So, you know, even though I hadn't really had a change of heart much at all in that time, I still, you know, took that advice to heart and did spend some time doing research on, you know, are there other programs in the UK that I know about now that I didn't know about then? You know, is there anything else that really appeals to me? And in that process ended up basically applying for 2 different programs, 2 different options for the second year. One was the program that I had initially planned to do. And then the second one was a different program that I hadn't initially thought about doing, but sounded neat. And in the process of doing that, you know, did those applications and realized, you know, that second program, it really wasn't what I wanted. I really wanted to stick with that first one. So I don't have a story of like changing anything dramatically because it ended up staying what I wanted to do. But I found it really valuable to like go through the process of really thinking, you know, doing that self-reflection sort of 3 months in to the Marshall and going like, is that what I want? You know, has my mind changed? And I found that it hadn't, but other people found that it had. And going through that process and really evaluating that again was useful at that stage because again, you are taking in so much new information, you know, in that first year as well. So, but there is a lot of flexibility and freedom available. And for me, it was nice just to go through that process of reassessing that and making sure that was what I really wanted.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I can add to this, but I would like to say that I believe that the Marshall Commission and the selection folks really like when students go places that aren't Oxford, Cambridge, or central London. And the UK is a big country and a really diverse country, and there are lots of great places to study and great places to do work. So avoid that laser focus on those big name prestigious schools that you've heard of a million times. They don't fund anyone to go to Hogwarts either, so just take that one right off your list. Sandra, I'd like to say kudos because you chose like two of the coolest cities in the UK, maybe in the world. And I spent 6 months at the University of York not too long ago as a Fulbright scholar, so I can testify that it was really a great place, great city, and great university. I did stay like pretty strict to my script, except that I changed from a 2-year program, which was going to be a master's, and instead got a 1-year performer certificate. So I came home a year earlier than originally planned, but I spent my time at the school that I had originally intended. In terms of like the change in my career though, I went into that thinking that I was going to come out of my Marshall Scholar experience as a performer, you know, someone who was going to play principal in a major orchestra and maybe teach at a university on the side. And now I find myself as someone who's had a full-time university job for 20 some years and is much more interested in teaching and research and academics than I am in being a full-time performer. Most of the work that I've done in terms of publishing, editing, etc., I can trace directly back to William Waterhouse. Every one of my major publications used manuscripts from his library or was somehow directly relatable to him. And in fact, my current project is writing a biography of William Waterhouse. So here I am nearly 30 years on, and tons of my career, tons of my personal life, I can draw a really direct line right back to my time as a Marshall.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, and I would say to Sandra's point of some people do change quite dramatically. I was one of those people. So I applied for the Rhodes as well as the Marshall, which means that the second year of my Marshall application, you know, kind of like, here's what I'll do with the second year, was perhaps slightly lazily, you know, the program at Oxford that I had written about in my Rhodes Scholarship. There was nothing wrong with it. And, you know, genuinely, I think it would have served me well, and it made sense to write about as that junior in undergrad that I was at the time. But then quite quickly in that first year of the UK Marshall, I came to realize just how much international law was shaping the environmental justice questions that I was interested in. And the fact that I had very intentionally as an American undergrad been like, oh God, I'm not studying law, no thank you to all of those classes. And then realizing how much I genuinely wanted and needed, you know, an understanding of that vocabulary and that system to do the kind of work that I was wanting to do. And so very happily, the Marshall Commission was like, you know, here's a little bit of money to go explore non-Oxbridge London universities to see what else might make sense. So I got to go on a bit of a tour of Scottish law schools because I was like, well, okay, I'm going to law school. I'll go to law school in Scotland because then if I'm miserable, I'll be in Scotland, you know, so like how miserable could I really be? Very good life choice, and had a really great time speaking with various legal scholars and professors in Aberdeen, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. Wound up at Edinburgh because of the, you know, kind of half and half way they allowed me to do environmental law and human rights law, but it was a complete 180. From kind of what I had written about in the application and expected to be doing, and certainly was, you know, never on any of the, you know, here's the training that I need, here's what I'll be doing in my future career kind of stuff. And I'm just so grateful for the Marshall, both in exposing me to that, right, via that first year, but also in being the kind of program that not only allows, but actually actively encourages that kind of exploration with, yourself, with academia, and with the UK all together, which is just a really meaningful impact on many people's lives. All right, with that, firstly, let me please just do a check to see if anyone attending has any questions that they would like to ask. Again, you can always throw them in the chat, but if you'd like to unmute and ask yourselves something. And great, we have one, as I say. So fantastic. And when we're thinking kind of perhaps more long-term or professionally, there tends to be perhaps an idea and or assumption that UK university degrees are seen differently as US degrees or from other countries. So maybe we'll kick first to Doug in terms of, working in the US as an academic. How does, kind of that back and forth between US and UK academia work for you? And then I'll speak a little bit as well about mine.
Yeah, a funny thing is in the academic world, being a Marshall Scholar is a really good line on your resume. In addition to the experience, the degree that you gain from that, but just having that byline, right, holds a lot of sway in a lot of university circles. In the music business, not so much, right? I mean, like a Pulitzer or a Grammy or something, right, would have a lot more cachet. But I lost my train of thought there. But the one funny thing that happened was when I came back to do a doctorate, then I started my doctorate at Ohio State, that other OSU school. I remember showing up and they wanted a transcript from the Royal Northern College of Music, right? And I said, well, they don't have transcripts, right? Like, and I got a performer's certificate. I didn't get a master's degree, and I didn't need it to begin my doctorate. I already had a master's from Illinois. And so I was going back and forth with the sort of graduate school office, and they said, nope, we need a transcript of all your academic work. And I would say, well, they don't have a transcript, there's no such thing. So eventually I just sent an email there and said, hey, can you guys send me something that's transcript-like? And someone there was pretty familiar with American universities, and they put something on letterhead that said, Doug Spaniel satisfied all the requirements for the postgraduate diploma in advanced studies in performance. And I brought that to the graduate school at Ohio State, and they said, okay, thanks, that's what we need, appreciate it.
So yeah, sometimes it is indeed just a little bit of translation service that is needed. There certainly are perceptions at some universities, and I think this does really differ kind of discipline to discipline, sector to sector, in terms of kind of how strong that bias for or against UK programs is. For those of us who are looking specifically at academics or very particular sectors, I will say, one, that a UK doctorate jumps right into the research, generally speaking. So in the US, usually if you were accepted to a PhD program, you would do some coursework and essentially earn a master's en route to doing the PhD. In the UK, those things are totally disaggregated, right? Which makes it easy for us to do individual one-off masters. But people will often do one of those and then, kind of use that to refine their PhD question and go apply for the research-focused heavy time of a PhD in the UK if they want to. They are thus shorter, but the research project isn't necessarily. So for plenty of disciplines, it doesn't make a huge deal. And as Doug was saying, the Marshall, gives you an academic resume boost and that kind of thing, which helps. One of my, kind of favorite job titles that someone got directly from the Marshall is an assistant professor of galactic archaeology. He's the Indiana Jones of space. Very, very cool person. Go look up Keith Hawkins. Anyway, so we do have plenty of folks who kind of, do the jump right into things. A lot of other Marshall scholars who know that they want to do a US academic career will kind of intentionally do the master's things in the UK. And then rather than a PhD in the UK, right, they will plan to go back and do doctoral studies in the US. Postdocs are another really kind of great way to do a little bit of that bridge building, right, before you're then trying to compete with, for tenure track positions and that kind of thing. And then specifically to law school, I have a law degree. It opens many doors. I was invited to testify at the UN on environmental conflict law and that kind of thing. But I could never, I haven't taken the bar. I could never, argue in American court and that kind of thing. I didn't do domestic law. That's not what I want to do. But certainly in American legal spaces, my British legal degree is valued and kind of seen as a really actually helpful take on the international legal system and that kind of thing. So here, talk to your professors, talk to mentors in your field, because it really does, I think, kind of change the sector to sector so much. Kat, thank you very much for your question. Do you want to jump in here and ask it, just to kind of give everyone a break from my voice, or do you want me to read it?
Well, my phone is a little wonky, so I'm not sure if it'll work. Okay, so I'm just wondering about a scholarship specific things that they expect you to do on their behalf, like where you have to put on the little Marshall name badge and you have to go to the place and do the things with the stuff. You know what I mean? Or I've heard that there's some, you have to go to so many conferences or something. You have to publish within a certain journal, or you just have to do certain things because they gave you the pile of money and they just want more than just you being successful. And so I'm just wondering, what are those things? Are there those things, or did I hear that wrong, or that sort of thing? And thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Kat. Really great question. So the Marshall Scholarship is by and large unconditional. The condition is that you get the degrees generally, right? Unless there's some very specific set of circumstances, and then you'll kind of go through a process with them to kind of figure out what needs to happen next and that kind of thing. So there is not some immediate contract of you're doing X, Y, Z, or need to show up these things, need to give us these outputs at the end and that kind of thing. We have an end of scholarship report, which is like a one-page letter to the commission, basically, right? That's kind of, here's what I did, thanks for the time in the UK, kind of moment. That's really the only very tangible requirement. You will be invited to, wear that Marshall badge and get trotted out at all kinds of events. As Doug mentioned, sometimes those are very cool moments when you get to meet members of royalty or that kind of thing. But there aren't specifics. That's not the case for all scholarship programs, right? Some do require, expect you to return to your home country, or work in a specific field, and that kind of thing. Especially those that are, tend to be given by your home governments and that kind of thing. Just thinking about scholarships around the world. But the Marshall really does not have any of those in particular. Doug, Sandra, other thoughts on this, or maybe just kind of some reflections also on some of the kind of official bits of Marshall that are essentially optional, but still, a major part of the experience?
I guess I'll jump in. Yeah, I'd say it's not so much requirements, but opportunities, right? I mean, when they say, hey, we're all gathering in Northern Ireland or in London or whatever the case may be, you say, hey, cool, that's great. I can also say that there was never any sort of requirement or expectations of things post-scholarship. But I'm more than happy to do whatever I can. I mean, things like this event, or I often serve as a reader or committee member, and I'm active in the Marshall Scholar, alumni communities and activities. Why? Because I feel like I owe them a debt of gratitude more than I can ever repay, right? What the Marshall did for me was so transformative, so profound in my personal life and my career, that I'm more than happy to do whatever I can to help the program and to help future Marshall Scholars, and really to help maximize the program. You will see things in the application about ambassadorial potential and building upon the special relationship between the two countries. But while you're there, it's not like you wake up in the morning and think, oh man, I got to do some ambassadorial activity today. You just go be who you are and do your work and be a good person and be active and friendly, and that's what they want. I think that's the aims of the program.
Yeah, I mean, I would second everything that Doug and Becca have said. I really like that phrasing of, just it's all opportunities, really. I mean, again, there are formal events that, the scholars are expected to attend, but they are largely either part of the orientation or part of some of the ongoing events that happen throughout the year. And they're really amazing opportunities to meet various figures of British society, whether it be government figures, ambassadors, or other people in various fields. And it's always really exciting to get to hear from people about what they're working on and to connect with British culture and society in that way. So those are all really amazing opportunities. And then again, the Marshall really just encourages, again, academic success and, achieving what you need to achieve on your grad programs. But, beyond that, the other goal of the program is really to foster that relationship with the US and the UK. So they want people to immerse themselves in British culture. And whether that means that you go and publish or go and, present at a conference somewhere, or whether it's you go, and get involved in an activity on campus where you're engaging and connecting with your local, British community. Those are all things that you're really encouraged to do. But, there is no expectation that there is any specific task that you're going to do, because, the nature of that relationship and the way that scholars choose to be ambassadors is different for everyone. And it's part of the reason you get selected, is that, whatever your both professional and extracurricular interests are, that's sort of how you're going to connect with Britain and form that, lasting relationship that ends up lasting longer than your actual scholarship tenure. But yeah, so I would just agree that the Marshall Scholarship sets up lots of opportunities for that engagement to happen, but there isn't specific sort of service expectations associated with the scholarship program.
Thanks both. And I will also just add briefly that for any, kind of official and or major events that are Marshall-wide, the Marshall's really good about making sure that scholars, who are doing, traveling and it will incur costs and that kind of thing are paid, for those costs. So it's also not the kind of thing where it's like, okay, like here's your scholarship fund, but you have to be back in London once a month, good luck with that train fare or whatnot. But rather it is a really, kind of targeted, here's the cap that's needed to help you, make sure that everybody, no matter where they are in the UK, has the same opportunities as part of the program, which I really appreciate as well. We are nearing the end of our time, so I want to do a quick check-in with Leanne and Ashley to just see if there's anything else that you would like us to touch on or other questions that you want to have, or kind of moments of advice and logistical notes for OSU students.
No, I'm incredibly grateful for your time and your insights. I feel like I've learned so much from this panel. Thank you so much. Becca, I'm particularly grateful for the point that you made about students from state schools applying for and being awarded Marshall scholarships. I think it's one of the main reasons why students hesitate to apply, because they think that scholarships are reserved for students from the big name, fancy Ivy League schools. So thank you for making that point. And I'm grateful to all of you for your time and your insights. Thank you so much.
I don't think I have anything else to add.
Any, words of advice, wisdom, encouragement that they might have? Doug?
I feel like I always go first. Before I dive into that, I would like to say way back in 1992, Illinois was the only state school to have 2 Marshall Scholars that year. But things have changed, and we were very proud of that, by the way. Things have changed drastically. There's a big push to get to find scholars from schools that typically are underrepresented. And I'm very proud to say that this class, the brand new class of Marshall Scholars, is the first time that it is a minority majority class. So the Marshall Commission is doing great work, and they're working hard on issues like that, and they have tangible results to show for it. Favorite memories or parting shots? Really what I would like to say is just be who you are, do what you do, and be the best version of yourself. And if the Marshall can help you do that and help you can achieve your aims, that would be great for you, and it'd be great for the Marshall program. But don't try to shoehorn yourself. Don't try to say, oh, I think they want me to be this person. I think they want me to do that. Because it really is very flexible. Be who you are, be genuine, be true, and hope for the best.
Yeah, I think Doug's advice is really great, and is something that I feel like I can continue to take up into the next stages of my career. It's always just, you know, important not to worry yourself with comparing yourself to others, but really just, you know, focus on what you're interested in, being yourself, and that's always the best way forward. It's really hard to think of a, you know, a favorite memory to highlight. Sort of racking my brain at the moment, but I mean, one thing that was cool for me, and one thing that you know, I was really interested in doing in the UK is that, you know, one of my hobbies that I enjoy is singing in choir, and that's always something I've done, and it's always been a fun thing. And I think a favorite memory is just when you go to a city like York and you're like, okay, I'm going to join the choir. It's really casual. It's not even, you don't even have to audition, like anyone can join. So it's not by any means, and you know, a group that is something that like it was open to everyone. It was a community group, and even those choirs are getting to perform at this, like the York Minster, which is this cathedral that's basically from, I don't know, the 14th or 15th century. So getting to sing and perform in a choir full of people from the university as well as the wider York community, because it was so inclusive and welcoming, in a space that was just stunning and beautiful and historic. That's certainly a memory that stands out. So you often find yourself in the UK doing very like normal, pretty basic things, and you find yourself in these settings that are really stunning, and it sort of causes you to take a moment and take it back and go, wow, I'm in a really neat place right now. So I think anytime I had those moments were definitely highlights of my experience. Yeah, and in terms of just like last words, I just am very excited about the prospect of seeing more scholars from Oregon selected for the Marshall Scholarship. So I would encourage anyone who is at all interested to go for it, because it can definitely be something that is an amazing opportunity in your life. And yeah, if you believe you can do it, you can do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to Doug and Sandra. And I think I will simply say, go Beavers. Right? I got the right one.
Reeves.
Go platypi. Thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure.